Hi, welcome to the channel. I'm doing a series of the 9 types of men you should avoid. And this episode, we're going to talk about Mr. Manipulator, the puppet master. Mr. Manipulator seeks a relationship with you to serve his purpose. And his purpose is to mold you into whatever he wants you to be. He also wants to extract some sort of resource from you, either your money, your car, your home, and he wants to do this with little to no reciprocation on his part. Now, the theme song that runs through any relationship with Mr. Manipulator is that if you don't do X, something bad will happen. Now, I know what you're thinking. What? Someone wants to mold or pull stuff from me? Oh, that's never gonna happen. Well, Mr. Manipulator is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And now what Mr. Manipulator wants to do is he wants to slip in and get you emotionally invested in him. So, Mr. Manipulator will play with your emotions. Or if you let them use sex, then you become really attached to them very quickly. So, Mr. Manipulator is all about control and power over you and over the relationship. Mr. Manipulator is also full of games because to him, you are a pawn to be played with. As far as Mr. Manipulator goes, there are several versions, a lot of versions, and you need to get familiar with all of them. Version number 1 is Mr. Narcissus or Prince Charming. This is the man who's too good to be true because he is. So if you're dealing with Mr. Narcissus, you want to be on the lookout for what's called triangulation. That's where there are 3 people in your relationship, not just you and Mr. Manipulator, but the ex, or you and Mr. Manipulator and the person he's cheating with, or you and Mr. Manipulator and your friend, or his mom, or your mom. There's always a third person in your relationship. The other thing you want to look out for is competition, because with that third person, you may be put into competition mode, which means you may be competing against the ex. You may be competing against the other person they're cheating with. You may be competing against mom. The second version of Mr. Manipulator is Mr. Player. That's Mr. Pretty Boy, Mr. Smooth. Mr. Player is attractive to you and he's attractive to others. You know it and he knows it. So most likely there are several women in that relationship with the two of you. Maybe another girlfriend, maybe a baby mama. When you're dealing with Mr. Player, there's no commitment. So you're not really in a relationship so much as you're in a situationship. And Mr. Player uses sex as a weapon. So if he wants you happy, he's gonna use sex. When you're sad, he's gonna cheer you up by using sex. When you're mad at him, he's gonna bring you down by using sex. The third version of Mr. Manipulator is Mr. User. So when it comes to dealing with Mr. User, you are in an unevenly yoked relationship with them. You're unevenly yoked emotionally, physically, financially, some way, shape, or form, you two are uneven. Now, Mr. User kind of overlays with Mr. Irresponsible. When it comes to Mr. User, however, you are plan A, never plan B. Because for Mr. User, his money is his money and he's gonna use that to buy what he wants to get, which means he's usually gonna buy what he wants. He needs you to pay for the things that he needs. So he may need your help to pay a bill for food or rent or a car note, or he may need you to buy gifts for his kids during Christmas time or birthdays. When it comes to dealing with Mr. User, you may even be saved in his phone under the name of how you're being used. The next version of Mr. Manipulator is Mr. Conman. So Mr. Conman has no intention of using your resources for the reason that they scammed you out of them. So you may think you're investing in a business. No. You may think that you're investing in a car for them to buy so that they can seek work. No. When it comes to Mr. Conman, basically he is conning you out of your resources. Next version is Mr. Controlling. So if you're dealing with Mr. Controlling, then you have to run all of your decisions by him, and I mean all of them. He has the ultimate veto power, so if he doesn't want you to go somewhere or do something, you're not allowed to go somewhere or do something. It seems like you're in a relationship that's built on the parent-child dynamic as opposed to being an equal team partner. And secretly, when it comes to Mr. Controlling, you're afraid of him. The next version of Mr. Manipulator is Mr. DL, Mr. Downlow. With Mr. Downlow, you know you're in a relationship with him, but you can tell that something's off. Mr. Downlow kind of overlaps with Mr. Committed in that you kind of suspect that he's cheating, but you really have no proof of any other woman around. So there's no lingerie, there's no perfume, there's no lipstick, there's no evidence that another woman is in the picture, but there's something that makes you think that he's cheating. Then there's Mr. Downlow's special friend. That would be that homie that comes in either two varieties. Either he's the homie who really hates you, or he's a homie that's so close to your man that he will come over and spend the night, he will watch your kids, he even goes on trips with you too. The next version of Mr. Manipulator is Mr. Prove Your Love. Mr. Prove Your Love is that man where you are constantly proving to him why he needs to choose you or why he needs to stay with you. And to do that, you're going to end up sacrificing your standards, your boundaries, your goals, your money. So when Mr. Prove Your Love says jump, you always say how high. What attracted you to Mr. Manipulator? Why would you want to be with somebody who wants to mold you or take your resources from you? Well, Mr. Manipulator is a wolf in sheep's clothing. That means he's attractive to you on one or on several levels, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. He gets you to drop your guard, and then you believe that you found the one. How does Mr. Manipulator gain power and control? It's a very fast process. They have to get you on board. They have to get you attached. They have to get you in love with them or in love with whatever scam they're pulling because the clock is ticking. They are wolves in sheep's clothing, and eventually that clothing is going to get too hot for them. They want to have you attached, in love, on board, entangled. By the time you figure out who they really truly are, by the time you look behind the smoke and mirrors, or by the time that they reveal themselves, you're too invested and you've given up too many of your resources to get away from them easily. Mr. Manipulator seeks power and control, and he may gain it by using these techniques. The first technique is gaslighting you. That's where Mr. Manipulator will challenge and then alter your reality. What you see, hear, and feel is not what you see, hear, and feel, according to Mr. Manipulator. When Mr. Manipulator successfully gaslights you, then you actually start to question whether you really did leave your purse open on the table, whether or not you actually told Mr. Manipulator that he could stay out all night with his friends, or whether or not you really did see that suspicious text in his phone. The second way is it can drop you into a fog. Fog, fear, obligation, and guilt is emotional blackmail, and it was explained by Susan Forward. Now with fear, you're in fear of a loss of Mr. Manipulator, a loss of your relationship with Mr. Manipulator, a loss of your family with kids if you've had kids with Mr. Manipulator, or you're in fear of a disaster that could happen to them if you don't do what they say. When it comes to obligation, Mr. Manipulator has told you that you're not living up to your standards and his expectations of what a girlfriend or a wife should do.
I thought you believed in second chances. I thought you were a good person.
When it comes to guilt, Mr. Manipulator gets you to believe that it's your actions that are causing the hurt to yourself, to Mr. Manipulator, to the family, to the relationship.
How can you leave me over one mistake? How could you do this to us? How could you do this to the family? How could you do this to the kids?
The next technique Mr. Manipulator can use to gain power control is to simply dominate you. Mr. Manipulator will steamroll over all of your boundaries. Mr. Manipulator will keep falling short of your expectations of a man in a relationship until you lower the bar and justify and rationalize Mr. Manipulator's bad behavior. Another way Mr. Manipulator may dominate you is he may punish you. You can be punished by being neglected. You can be punished by being the victim of silent treatment, or you can be punished by being the victim of communication flaws where you two can never get anything solved because Mr. Manipulator is always sabotaging any type of deep conversation you want to have. The next technique they can use is to control the narrative. So Mr. Manipulator is very good at telling you and telling other people what they want to hear. So you may hear one story.
Baby, 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 she seduced me. You know I love you.
The other woman may hear a different story.
I'm telling you, she's a monster. She won't let me do anything. She just nags and complains. She doesn't love me like you do.
The family may hear another story.
I'm telling you, your daughter, she is so insecure now.
And your friends may hear a fourth story.
Man, let me tell you, she is so jealous. She is always looking through my phone trying to find stuff. That's why I have a second phone.
Basically, a relationship with Mr. Manipulator is a circus. You're filled with sideshows where Mr. Manipulator seems amazing until you know the trick. Once you look past the smoke and mirrors, you see Mr. Manipulator for who he is. Another thing with your relationship is that it's going to be roller coaster rides, which means you're going to have some great highs, great good times, maybe going on fantastic vacations, but they're going to be followed by extreme lows, real bad times where perhaps you're humiliated at the family cookout. Now, some of the big clues that you're dealing with Mr. Manipulator, number one clue, the lies.
He told me he was 31, but he was actually 41.
Right, even from the beginning, Mr. Manipulator has lied to you about who he is.
He told me that if I didn't help him with his phone bill, that his phone would be cut off. Then the next week, I see him walking in new Jordans. He told me that I was the only one, but then I found out that he had 2 other girlfriends. He told me that he had 2 kids, but he really had 6 kids. He told me that he lived downtown, then come to find out that he lives in his mama's basement.
This is the hallmark of a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's called bait and switch. And if you want to know, how do they control the narrative? Meaning, how can they tell you one story, the other woman another story, your friends a third story, and your family a fourth story? Lies. The next big clue is that you're going to notice character flaws in Mr. Manipulator, especially when it comes to integrity. Their words and their actions don't match.
Baby, I'm telling you, I'll never see her again.
And then they see her again. They'll tell you that,
I promise you, I'm going to sign up with a counselor and I'm going to work on myself.
and they never work on themselves.
It will never happen again.
And then it happens again. When it comes to honor, Mr. Manipulator's word really doesn't mean much. That's how he's able to scam people and not even care about it. That's how he was able to scam you and not care about you. And once you see the wolf that was in sheep's clothing, they expect you to accept them as they are, even though that's not who you fell in love with. You fell in love with Prince Charming. They are not Prince Charming. They also cannot change into Prince Charming because they never were Prince Charming. And that's an important clue that you have to understand. Prince Charming is not coming back because he was never there. Get it? Another clue that you're dealing with Mr. Manipulator is that there will be little to no reciprocation on the level of what you've done or sacrificed for them. Another clue that you're dealing with Mr. Manipulation is the presence of the double standard. Mr. Manipulation expects you to forgive without consequences no matter what they do to you or no matter what they say to you or no matter what you uncover. However, you will never be forgiven for doing anything similar. So they can lie to you, but don't you dare lie to them. They can cheat on you, but you better never cheat on them. They can spend your money, but don't you dare touch their money. Another clue that you're dealing with Mr. Manipulator is no accountability. No matter how much evidence you confront them with on their behavior, it's never their fault. They are the masters of blame shifting.
Hey, wait. It's not me, it's you. Hey, wait a minute. Okay, maybe it's a little bit me, but it's me and you, but mostly you.
So that's Mr. Manipulator, and unfortunately, a lot of women fall for him. And they fall for him simply because, like I said, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. So there are lies at the very beginning. So the minute you realize that you have been lied to from the beginning, you need to cut bait and run before you become the next victim of Mr. Manipulator. Well, that's all for this video. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me, even if